Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Raining still, as it has all week here in the lush and green, evergreen state. But it does get old after a while. Pretty much our spring over in this part of the state just consists of constant rain. And eventually we hit our summer, but yeah, I need to get out in the yard and chop a bunch of brush down and whatnot before it goes nuts, but gonna have to wait. Anyway, we are here at episode 7, an extremely important episode, and I know I've said that before, but this is the one we've been waiting for. And I hope you're have stuck with the Twin Peaks series thus far, if you've been watching it for the first time, or if you're revisiting it for a second or third time, and that you've managed to find my reviews interesting enough to keep up with them as well. This is the payoff for all of our patience. And even though the show's great and you should be enjoying it if you're this far in, yeah, we're getting some serious payoff in this episode and some iconic moments. So let's get started, shall we? Well, it wouldn't be the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station without coffee and donuts all around, so appropriate enough. It looks like Mike is still in the driver's seat of his quote-unquote vessel, so he hasn't switched back to Philip Gerard. Looks like Hawk's going to head over to Harold's and see if he can find the secret diary, something that we'll definitely need to find out further information. Gordon mentions that he's off to Bend, Oregon. I've always liked Bend, Oregon. I heard it's kind of gone through a big boom phase as far as the economy and population. It used to be a stop on the way to Sun River, Oregon, where a while back in my high school and middle school days, my folks and I would go down there to meet up another family and friends of ours to celebrate the New Year over down in Sun River. And Sun River is definitely, if I had the cash to retire down there, I definitely would. I love that place. It's if you ever get a chance to check it out, especially if you like to ski. Or if you just, or you like to golf or whatever, that sort of thing. But yeah, Sun River, Oregon is awesome. Definitely one of my favorite places I've ever visited in the continental United States. All right, back to business. At the Great Northern, we've got a bunch of Navy, I guess, officers and other assorted personnel. Somebody gave them all bouncy balls. I don't know if they're like racket ball or something, and they're all bouncing it and making a ton of noise. But like I said, it's kind of like the the barbershop quartet smoking their cigarettes and practicing while Dale and Albert are talking about Buddhists in Tibet. So yeah, it's Twin Peaks. It makes plenty of sense. Let's see. Well, Mike can basically sense Bob's presence the closer he is to him. So they're basically having all the guests come up and so he can kind of get his little psychic antenna working and see if he can find out who Bob has possessed or is inhabited. And Mike seems to be overcome by something, some kind of force. He mentions the arm, the arm. As Ben Horne approaches, we see him we kind of switch back between Ben walking down the hall and Mike having people brought before him, and so kind of building up to that, where he finally realizes that Bob, or at least something that sets him off, occurs when Ben is nearby, and he keeps yelling, I can't. I don't know what that means. Maybe the force he's feeling is too overwhelming, and I think he's going to faint, possibly. All right, so that's a pretty interesting scene. Ben is becoming, with what's gone on, Ben's getting a little bit more focus on him as far as being a suspect. Over at Harold Smith's place, it's a wreck, and unfortunately Hawk finds poor old Harold has hung himself. So apparently the episode with Donna pushed him over the edge, but I imagine it was just one in many of traumatic events in his life. Over at the Palmers, we get a little Louis Armstrong playing. It seems like they're stuck in the way back when. I don't know if they have a radio at the house. They seem to like the classics. Let's see, and Sarah and Leland are visiting with Maddie, and she tells him that she's going to head home, and so she's got Mrs. having a life of her own, and so on and so forth. Nothing major there. Harold Smith's apartment, Dale and everybody have arrived, and they're looking around, and Dale finds a note, I don't know, tucked into his waistband or somewhere or the other. And the phrase, j'ai une âme solitaire, I am a lonely soul. And remember, Donna will remind us later that Mrs. Tremont's grandson said the same thing to her before she even had met Harold. So yeah, if you go back to that episode, he says that exact same phrase to her after Mrs. Tremont says mentions Harold Smith. Interesting. And it doesn't, that part with Donna pops up later, so it's not really a spoiler. If you're paying attention, she just kind of recalls, because Andy, as normal, this is a little bit of a spoiler but not to the point where it's going to actually make a difference in whether you find out the story. Let's just say, you might remember how Andy is very sensitive when things like this happen, so he starts kind of saying that phrase over and over again, and Donna overhears him and says that Mrs. Tremont's grandson said the same thing. So a little sneak preview, but like I said, it's just it's a minor thing. I just figured out how to deal with it right now. Over at the Johnsons, some domestic squabbles. Shelley's gonna have to quit her job apparently because of the budget. Leo kind of has a little screaming fit and mentioned something about new shoes. Remember that the Giant said there was a clue at Leo's that Dale did not find. Maybe this is the new shoes has something to do with it, and we'll see a little bit later. Audrey confronts her father and at the Great Northern and lets him know all about her exploits or not necessarily her exploits, but all of what she learned while up there at One-Eyed Jack. So the jig is up. And on a side, who in their right mind would think that Prudence is a sexy name? Prudence, yeah, I think you could try a little bit harder to come up with something a little more exotic. It's like, Esther or something like that, not gonna really get your blood pumping, if you know what I mean. Apparently Ben has owned the brothel for 5 years. He knew Laura was there, and without saying so, he basically all but admits that he was having a sexual relationship with Laura. For the details of that are unknown, but they did sleep with each other at some point. When Audrey asks the big question, if Ben killed her, he says that he loved her. And he still has a photo of Laura on his desk, which is a little odd. So yeah, and remember, like I said, the one-armed man had that strange sort of fainting spell when Ben was near. So maybe Ben was a bit obsessive about Laura. It's a possibility. So Shelley goes to quit her job. Norma says, you'll be welcome back whenever, because they're BFFs. Nadine and Ed show up to get into the next episode of Nadine's high school years revisited. The gag of that. So yeah, like I said, if you've seen it for the first time, it's not bad. It's kind of funny. But if you've seen it, a lot, it's usually a moment I'll skip over. Mike and Bobby show up and to Leo's. Apparently they went and got some boots he had repaired. Mike mentioned something about people muling drugs in their boot. They they take a hammer to the heel of the boot, knocks it aside, and there is a mini cassette, micro cassettes in there. That looks to be like the Giant's clue that he mentioned. So what is on that tape? Dale is trying to piece together the shredded pieces of Laura's diary at the sheriff's department with plenty of donuts. And believe me, if I had that kind of metabolism, that would be my breakfast at least a couple times a week. All that, dozen donuts. But no, I got carbs don't agree with me too much. I balloon up with water retention. I can't go down that road. Some people are lucky, I guess. All right, so now that he's doing a little bit of an examining of the diary pieces that are been kind of ripped, a bunch of them are ripped up. Apparently, the one armed man's information given during their interrogation of him is corroborated with Laura's diary from what Dale can decipher. So Mike was telling the truth. So we don't have to worry about him playing any games. Bob is mentioned multiple times in the diary. Apparently, he had been appearing in her life since early adolescence and was a threatening figure. And he says there are intimations of regular abuse and molestation. So starting from then. He's also referred to as a friend of her father's. So who do we know that is a friend of her father's that has kind of come into the focus? So yeah, you can see why Laura had a kind of a double life and a darker side. If that was going on, who knows what her psychological profile would be if you were to go down that road. So we're getting a little more to the point. And remember, this is all her. Her revelations and what she's admitted and put down. So yeah, and we've got something real interesting right after that that Dale reads out. Someday I'm going to tell the world about Ben Horne. I'm going to tell them who he really is. So Ben Horne, pointing to him again. Audrey comes in and tells Dale that her father was sleeping with Laura, among the other details about One-Eyed Jacks. If you may not even notice as it's playing, but that there's a real interesting jazz piece playing during this whole part. It's almost like, I don't know if it's just bass and drums, but it's weird. It's like I think David Lynch is a real fan of kind of avant-garde jazz and kind of more quirky type music. But yeah, it's like, when you're thinking of a soundtrack or something, it's like, yeah, play some kind of weird jazz, beat or groove here when we talk about, really important stuff having to do with a murder case. Yeah, so and then I just noticed that was kind of cool. Yeah, so without chemicals, he points. So Mike grabbed his arm and fainted when Ben came into the room. So it looks like Ben is in a little bit of trouble. Ben is finalizing some kind of a deal with Mr. Tajimura, but it ends abruptly when Dale and crew come to arrest him. He tries to sneak out the back door. Just like Ben, what a weasel. Now is when things start getting interesting, my dear listeners and subscribers. At the Palmer house, a record is spinning, kind of making this little kind of clicking type repetitive noise. Sorry, tongue-tied. But no music, so it must be the record must have played and gone to the very end. It just, the needle hasn't, for some reason, the needle didn't lift off of the record. We see Sarah crawling down those stairs. Like I said, the stairs were very important. And of course, I get a little beep from my stupid computer telling me a restart is required. Yeah. Anyway, we see her crawling down. Like I said, the stairs were shown repeatedly. Remember, we saw scenes of her running down the stairs, with her voice kind of distorted and everything slowed down. So, like I said, it played a part, and this is we'll find out more about this later. So yeah, Sarah's crawling down the stairs, unable to get up when she reaches the living room floor. So something's happened to her. Ben is brought into the sheriff's department, put in the holding cell, and then the log lady shows up, and someone we haven't seen for a while. So, and every time she's kind of been in the picture or appeared, it's something of importance going on. She remember she showed up at the Double R to tell Major Briggs to deliver that message to Dale about the messages they'd been intercepting with their little observation equipment. So yeah, she shows up, so something's going down. She says, "We don't know what will happen or when, but there are owls in the Roadhouse." The owls are enigmatic creatures that are not what they seem. So that's an interesting revelation there. So what's happening? Something's big's going to happen. You can just feel it. We get the big reveal, that Mr. Tajimura is in fact Catherine Martell. And I'd like a show of hands to those who figured this out before the reveal that it was indeed Kathy. To be honest, the first time I saw the show, I figured, given it was Twin Peaks and seeing all the weird stuff that had been going on before, and I figured, anything is possible. Why not a character like that being the actual Mr. Tajimura? I didn't, I thought it was a separate character, so I must hang my head in shame that I did not solve that rather unimportant mystery. But if you figured it out, cheers to you. All right, so back to more important events. At the Palmer house, Sarah is crawling along the floor. She looks like she's either maybe she was drugged, maybe she's having some kind of kind of what happened to Miss Philip Gerard, kind of like a fainting attack or something. She's not in her right mind. Then she looks up and we see a white horse materialize before her. And this particular symbolism has been debated online and stuff. So if you want to look it up and see what people's different arguments are about the symbolism, mine and my initial gut reaction when I first saw it was that this is an omen of death. The pale horse. So that, and remember, Sarah sees these are visions that she has. So obviously a horse didn't just materialize and really, and it was probably just a vision she had. So yeah, to me, I think I just think of death or as being an omen of death. So maybe you think it's something different. White is if we're going for like literal symbolism, white is considered a symbol of purity or whatever, kind of in the classic sense. So there's a lot of ways you can go with it. So. But for this episode, I'm just going to say it's a bad omen. So we're going to the Roadhouse, which apparently is a biker type bar, but the music there is anything but what you'd expect bikers to listen to, which is kind of funny. That's another Twin Peaks thing. You got this rather homely lady who happens to have quite the angelic voice. She definitely has a great voice, and I think David Lynch helped she produced, I don't know if it was one or multiple albums, and David Lynch was kind of her manager, and I think he wrote all the lyrics. So if you like her singing and you like the music that she plays, I'm sure it's probably available out there. You probably can find it on YouTube. So just heads up with that. So, so it is definitely an interesting contrast because you got all these, these supposedly tough bikers in there. Listen to this lady sing. James and Donna kind of talk about Harold and that she didn't really understand, that there must have been something more to him that had caused him to take those drastic measures in his life. Dale, Harry, and the log lady are enjoying the performance with peanuts and beer. And like I said, normally this kind of music would do nothing for me really, but in the context of the show and then this scene particularly, it works really great. And the second song especially. The first one's kind of a more upbeat, and then this one's real somber. And all of a sudden, the band fades out of sight, and we've got notice those red curtains or red drapes right behind the band that become the focus, and then the giant appears. And if you look around in the audience or in the crowd, you'll notice that everyone stopped moving. So it's almost like a moment in time where time stands still, or at least that's what it seems to be kind of hinting at, or something supernatural is taking place. And And the giant with he's got a kind of a sad face saying, "It is happening again. It is happening again." What does he mean? All right, folks, this is the payoff I was telling you about. Back at the Palmers, we get to see one of the most iconic and shocking reveals in all of TV history, in my opinion, given the build-up. Did you figure it out? Who Bob was inhabiting and who had really killed Laura? And I didn't, that's for sure. But I'm sure some of you out there probably narrowed it down a little bit and at least got close to figuring it out. But they did a heck of a job of pulling us one way and the other, with Leo eventually and Jacques Renault, and then over to Dr. Jacoby, and then Ben Horne. So yeah, I mean, I'm really done really well. I mean, I think a lot of people were very surprised and shocked about it, especially when you remember that Dale was reading the diary and saying, this was a person that had, and also with Mike said that he'd been in Twin Peaks for nearly 40 years. So yeah, think of that, and plus think of Laura mentioning as an adolescent, repeated molestation and abuse. So yeah, start putting those notions together, folks. If like I said, it'll get, we're yet to have hit the climax. And it's not even this episode. We move a little bit further on before we get to the finale. But yeah, it's a great reveal. I think it's extremely iconic, especially since Ray Wise, I believe that is the name of the actor that plays Leland Palmer. I watched an interview of his after season 1 on YouTube, where they're all trying to ask him, who is the killer, or can you give us any clues? And he probably says, "It was me, I killed her." So yeah, it must have been tempting. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so let's get back to the specifics. Maddie's basically going to suffer Laura's fate. And remember how similar they look. I mean, obviously it's the same actress, but Leland saw Maddie, and also remember Maddie mentioned that she was leaving in the morning the next day. So yeah, it's a powerful scene. And remember what Mike mentioned, that Bob feeds on fear. So, if he was just going to kill her outright, he could have just strangled her or something like that, or, stabbed her or something. But the terror is a huge part of this kind of sick ritual of his. The more he can get her freaked out and terrified for her life, the more he feeds off of that energy, that negative energy. And Frank Silva does a great job in this scene of just looking like a complete psychopath, but not looking comical, looking truly menacing. And that just expression he gets on his face, where he's got that grin and that just crazed look, it just works perfectly. And David Lynch directed this particular episode. I went and looked it up to make sure. And he and Mark Frost co-wrote the episode. So he did an amazing job how they set this scene up. We see, the part where it's kind of slowed down. We've got that kind of, distorted voice of Bob's. Almost sounds like an animal, like some kind of beast. It's almost like this. Yeah, this is kind of guttural type of, growl or just, noise. And he's kissing all over her face. Remember that fear and the pleasures are his children. So he's inhabited Leland as a parasitic entity, so he's feeding off of the energy that she's giving off, if we were to think about it in that sense. Like that fear and, and her, and everything was actually, was something, like a substance, like an energy that actually could be, it manifested physically or in some kind of supernatural way. So he's he's feeding off that. I mean, Leland's the one that's there physically in the flesh. So that's kind of what the whole thing is about. Is he's savoring all of this emotional, outflowing from Maddie as a kind of, because he's a parasite and he feeds off of these emotions and given he's also inside of Leland's mind or inside of his body or his soul or whatever, then Leland is obviously, Leland's in somewhere out in the nether somewhere as far as his consciousness goes. So he's feeling these also. He's feeling this adrenaline rush and he's feeling this, sadistic. So Bob's just, he's just devouring all of this negative energy, all of this fear and terror. So think about that when you're watching it, and it may give you an even stronger impression about, what it's all about in this scene. It was great, like I said. And you can see Leland's kind of his conscience or his consciousness or whatever you want to call it is kind of fading in and out, because you've got the moments where he's kind of Laura, he's my baby, and then it fades back out, and then Bob's in there again. And eventually, he mentions that, Leland says you're going back to Missoula, Montana. So cracks her face into the wall, and that's unfortunately the end for Maddie. So remember, this is going to go a little longer than I planned, but so what? This is good stuff to talk about. Good stuff to analyze. Remember, this show was aired on CBS, and this is pretty graphic. It's not Game of Thrones, just or whatever, where it's just blatant shock value. But you can do a lot with, the PG-13, even I don't even know what it was rated back then. I'd probably think PG-13, but it might have even been PG some episodes. Remember, they weren't as sensitive back then as they were, and it was aired later at night, so it's an evening program. So yeah, you don't have to go all NC-17 or borderline X-rated to create a horrifying situation. Hopefully, how I explained it to you, what's actually taking place and why Bob is doing this, that's pretty horrific. It's so the psychological aspect of it. If you just kind of think about it a little bit, and then rewatch the scene. I invite you to rewatch the scene again with that in mind. So it's just a really, really powerful. It's really well done. That's why I like David Lynch's directing so much. And then at the end, Bob leaves his signature by putting a letter, looks like a letter O, under Maddie's fingernail with a hobby knife. So yep, good stuff. We go back to the Roadhouse, and the Giant's got that kind of sad, somber face as he looks at Dale. And Dale's, they're kind of, their gazes are matched. And Dale's kind of in that kind of an odd state too. It's almost like he's kind of faded out from reality. And we fade back into the present with the band. We see our friend over there at the bar, old Senor Drool Cup. I don't think he ever has an actual name. And then he comes over to Dale to say, he's so sorry. He's like, he knows something. And that would beg the question: what is he sorry about? And this may be spoilerish, but not. It isn't really. I think you guys are intelligent enough to put this together. And what I'll do is I'll reference. Remember when the Giant showed up at Dale's room in the beginning of season 2, and then immediately after that, the old man showed up. So, are you putting these together? I think you probably did, or you guys get it. So the Giant shows up on stage. This old man just happens to be at a biker bar, Roadhouse, in his off of work. Something tells me that's not where he'd be hanging out, especially since he's so kind of halfway out to lunch as far as mental faculties go. So yeah, and remember that the giant is saying it is happening again, and I'm pretty sure he's saying someone is being murdered by Bob again. That's pretty much the only thing he could be hinting at. So then he vanishes, and then the old man all of a sudden comes over to Dale and says, I'm so sorry. Put those together, folks. Remember what Mike said. I am an inhabiting spirit. So hopefully that makes sense. Darna starts to cry all of a sudden. I don't know if she got kind of, maybe she sensed something that was happening, or maybe just the outflow of emotions of everything, and paired up with the sad song, and just kind of pushed her over the edge. Bobby listens to the song. He's kind of up there at the bar, and my guess is telling by his expressions on his face, he's kind of thinking over the whole situation with Shelley. Maybe he's kind of at a point where he's kind of confused in where he's going in his life, and with this current situation with Shelley, since everything fell apart essentially with the whole, insurance money thing. So he's having a bit of an internal conflict, I guess. It's pretty apparent. And yeah, the gears in Dale's head are starting to turn now that he has been given this information both by the giant and by the mention of what the old man said to him. So yeah, and remember, this is all happening while Ben Horne is in a jail cell, locked behind bars. So I imagine all of this stuff is just, all of a sudden starting to play into his mind, and he's kind of like, holy crap, what's happening? So yeah, great episode. I went over a little bit longer than I expected, but no big deal. It's good stuff to talk about. This is just me kind of, telling you why Twin Peaks is such a great show. The way that it's done that, and that reveal, and it's like it can get silly at times with the Nadine and stuff, and Shelley and Bobby and some of the others, but when it comes down to the seriousness and the real kind of hard-hitting emotional stuff, it delivers, and this episode definitely delivers. So yeah, definitely. And when it comes to like TV moments and experiences, the reveal of Leland as being inhabited by Bob, and his killing Maddie in that whole scene ranks up there with him as being one of the best. So yeah, Leland, we know who the killer is, but he hasn't been caught yet. He's still on the loose. So, and Dale's still he's got to figure some things out, and we'll see how this all plays out. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, and I hope you enjoyed the review, and it gave you some things to think about. And I'll have it uploaded tonight, and I will have episode 8 out tomorrow, and we'll keep going from there. All right, folks, I hope you're doing well today. I hope everything's good on your end of the interwebs, and I'll talk to you later. Take it easy.